So welcome to this week's Active Travel Cafe. We'll start with our news roundup. So who would like to share any news that they've got? I've got a couple of bits myself, but there's still quite a lot going on around. Adam, over to you.
This one's more of a general one that people should be aware of, which is that there's a committee, Public Accounts Committee, looking at Active Travel England, and they're looking for public submissions of evidence. So I put the link into the chat. The cut-off date is the 5th of July. So if you're going to the Oxford sort of a transport conference thing, you could probably rush something out on that last day.
Thanks, Adam. And I don't know if anyone saw the report out last week from, was it the National Audit Office, who've audited this basically massive gap between the government's policy commitments to active travel and the budget they're in. If anyone's got a link handy to that, it'd be good to post in the chat. So I don't know, Adam, do you know if that report will feature in this inquiry? Are they connected or not?
As far as I can work out from just the reading of this, they're trying to look at evidence as to whether or not they can reach their targets by 2025, which they clearly won't. So I'm assuming that report will feed into that. But they're also asking for evidence from community groups, individuals, from national organizations in terms of where are they going wrong. So I've already started putting together my own sort of submission, but it'll probably take me a couple of more weeks to refine it down to something concise. So I think the submissions have to be under 500 words, which isn't a lot. But if you've got 100, 200 of these, that's a lot to read.
Because you messaged about it earlier, I effectively gave a nudge to our local transport authority and said, are you submitting evidence to this about the need for more longer term funding and none of this piecemeal nonsense? So that's another way of doing it. Just make sure that your local transport body know about it. Right, let's hear from Ruth.
Hi everybody, apologies if there's noise from the garden, but the children next door are having great fun. Two things. I was hoping Roxanne would be here because she was at the same event I was at today, the all-party parliamentary cycling and walking group cycling and walking event. But very briefly, because that's not what I really want to say, is Jesse Norman kind of blamed Ukraine for the fact that they've had to cut the funding and watch this space. I'm sure he said something a bit more interesting than that, but it was a really good event and Dutch Cycling Embassy were there. And I met all sorts of amazing people, Boardman and Ned Bolting and Phil Jones, and putting names faces. But what I really want to say is I volunteered all weekend on a cycle zone as part of a Green Days festival in Chiswick. And it's interesting that we've got joyriders here. Our joyriders came and the Ealing one and Cycle Sisters from Hounslow. Countless women, though, who came up would say that, and I'd say, well, do you go cycling? Are you on a bike? Oh, no, my husband, my partner does, but I'm not like that. And it seemed to be, I know that I was talking to Lucy, that the information they're getting from TfL is that the thing that women fear is danger. But also some women don't want to appear to be in a certain way when they're cycling. And there still is that problem of image, which obviously Joyriders is brilliant about and Cycle Sisters is amazing. So all of us on the ground still have to get over the idea that you can just jump on a bike wearing anything and just go to the local shops, which I know you all know here. But men who have female partners need to also encourage them that they too can get on a bike, and it must be the right kind of bike for them. That's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Ruth, and I expect we'll get into that in the discussion after Annette and Laura have spoken. David.
Hi, thanks. I put some stuff in the chat, basically. A lot's happened in Birmingham over the last 2 weeks, and I put some links in and tried to summarise them. Firstly, Adam Tranter, our Cycling and Walking Commissioner, wrote a very strong letter, not sure I've had a response yet, to the Police and Crime Commissioner and to the new Chief Constable, Craig Guilford, about policing as a response to road deaths. And then we had a letter from Better Streets for Birmingham. I don't know if anyone from Better Streets is here, but it's a new community-based campaigning group that grew out of COVID, really, which is doing really good work, and certainly Push Bike supports them. But they wrote a very strong letter, which we countersigned to the city council, saying you've got great plans, but you need to accelerate them to make Birmingham much safer for cycling and walking, and that targets of 2027 were too slow, encouraging them to use the spirit of the Commonwealth Games to get a move on. Very nice letter, I think. Then we had a vigil last Saturday because of a spike in road deaths, very much like what happened in London, I think, in 2016. Cyclists, but also pedestrians, children, hit and runs, a whole spike of them. It's been really upsetting. And we have a major crossing. If you want to get out of the city going south, you cross the ring road at a junction, which has traffic lights and everything. And a guy was killed, a father, because a car jumped a red light. A lot of these drivers seem to be on drugs, uninsured, and it's just really bad news. So the vigil, and there's a video about it, a very good video done by Kirsten, who's part of Better Streets, which summarises that. And the only two other things I'd like to say very briefly when I got you, the Streets Ahead podcast that Laura Laker did this week, I think is excellent. It was from a conference in London, but it had a guy from Hackney, Liz Clements from Birmingham, and Phil Jones from Phil Jones Associates. Just a really good discussion which compared London to some of the things that are happening in Birmingham, which are not dissimilar to what's happening in other cities, I think. And then lastly, just to, I don't know if anyone's here from Action Vision Zero, but Amy Aaron-Thomas has done a brilliant set of submissions to the all-party walking and cycling group on their justice inquiry, which I'd highly commend to you. I suspect they'll be on their website. I haven't got the link here. Okay, that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'll see if I can find a link to that, or perhaps if anyone else can. The video from the Birmingham Vigil was really well done, I thought, and also in light of sort of, you know, needing to find ways to protest within the law. Quite well done in terms of walking on the crossing when it was green and off when it was red. And so if anyone's got a link to that video, or I'll find it when I'm not speaking, it'd be good to share that. Becky.
Thanks.
It should be on the chat.
Thanks, David. Becky.
The new Lewis to almost Eastbourne cycle route built by National Highways is opening on Friday with an official event. It's 13 kilometres and very good. It's shared, but it's really attractive, and all the clubs in Sussex are very happy about it. There's walking and there's even a Pegasus crossing or two. Anyway, so that's good. On a separate issue, I attend the Transport for the South East Transport Forum, and they've just appointed consultancy City Science to develop their regional active travel strategy. We haven't been introduced to them yet, or the brief or anything. We don't really know anything very much about it. But if anybody has any experience of City Science, on their website, it looks like they've done work in Winchester and Oxford. I'd be interested to know. And then the third point is the active travel funding. Some has gone to East Sussex County Council. They have a very poor record on delivering cycling facilities. They scored 1 in their assessment, but a lot of people think they shouldn't have got that high. And some of their plans, and it seems they've got funding for this, is to remove cycling in quite a part of Eastbourne town centre, so that you wouldn't be able to cycle, for example, from the station down to the shops and thereabouts. So obviously that's a problem if Active Travel England fund the removal of cycling in town centres. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, if anyone can help out Becky there, please do offer support through the chat. Do we have any other updates from anyone today? I've seen we've got some participants in the naked bike ride. Perhaps we won't share photos of that one. No. Okay, well, there'll probably be a bit of time after our speakers if people have got other things to share. So let's move into the speaker section now. So delighted to welcome Laura. Sorry for mangling your surname earlier, Laura. I'd much rather hear it from you in your Italian accent. So over to you, Laura. And Laura will be followed by Annette Pattinson. And as I said, they're based in Oxford and working on participation schemes there. Laura, over to you.
Thank you. I'm sharing my screen.
Yeah, I'll let you know when it's working. We did try it beforehand and we got there, so let's try again. Brilliant. Yeah, you're halfway there.
Yeah, let me see.
And then just get the slides
Can you
up.
see it?
Perfect. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Di Giacomo, and I work with project related with sustainability, and especially environmental sustainability. A couple of years ago, I got involved and I started working as active travel champion at St. Ebbe's Primary School in Oxford. I then trained to become a bikeability instructor, and since then, I have been working with Annette on activation projects. So, what is an activation project? Is a project that wants to demonstrate that actually the non-cyclist doesn't really exist. Everyone can become a cyclist. A non-cyclist is just a person who needs a trigger and a personal and hands-on approach to become a cyclist. As a trigger, we identify two categories. So one is the so-called bottom-up. So the trigger is basically the motivation, what makes the people thinking, I want to learn to ride a bike, I want to be more confident. And it could be the cost of living, it could be for health reasons, well-being, traffic congestion, even children nagging the parents, saying, I want to ride a bike, just come with me. And the second one is what we call top-down triggers. And it could be LTNs in place, school street schemes, traffic filters, speed limits. So once we've got the trigger, the key is the personal approach. So the majority of these people are what we call invisible. So they're really hard to reach. They don't reach out. So a personal approach, personal engagement is crucial. And I know that it's been seen as a resource-consuming approach, but it leads to a snowball's effect where people who take part in the training, they then refer other people. So it's very effective. And so once we've got the people and we reach them, then again, it's really crucial to support them with bike provision, tailored supporting, tailored training, like learn to ride sessions, budding support, ride on road sessions. Every person is different, and it needs to be supported until the end of the process. So here you've got a slide from with a lot of quotes from some of our participants, and I think it's interesting and to see what they think at the beginning. And we always like to remember them. Okay, see, this is what you thought at the beginning, and see where you're at now, and so they can realize how transformational was going through the process of learning to ride and be independent on bikes. Sorry. Up to now, we delivered 3 activation projects in Oxford. The first one, it was run by Joyriders Oxford. Annette was delivering the project. It was called Budding Support. And the trigger was mixed. The very interesting part of this project, it was that one of the new rider just finished this year her training to become a bikeability instructor. The second one is what I did at Santabs, a primary school, as active travel champion. So because of the school street scheme, parents couldn't drive to school anymore. And so part of the support that I offer and the alternative that I offer to parents was a bike library. So they still have access to bikes for free, and then learn to ride sessions as well as bike handling skills at the school. 24 people were trained and 8 families were addressed in 9 months. The last one that Annette and I just finished, it was run by Avanti Cycling. It's called From Cradle to Cycle. And it was took place in the OX4 area in Oxford, which is quite a deprived area. The reason for running this project there, it was because it was in collaboration with a group called Oxford Community Action, and they wanted to help the community to find an affordable means of transport, and the bike was just the logical things to do. And so we deliver over 3 months with us 8 families. We train more than 20 people. We provided around 30 bikes, and we set up a bike mechanic as part as the project. So all these projects were managed and delivered by Annette and I, either independently or together. And the total cost of these projects were about less than £15,000. As you could see from the picture at the beginning, 99, if not 100% of our audience comes from ethnic minorities. So we do believe in the power of activation project, but also we believe that if we want more people on bikes, we think we need to join all the pieces and all the other factors together. So the infrastructure, the top-down, let's say, trigger, and then join with activation projects. So at the end, we can have more people on bikes. So I leave you with Annette. She will talk to you about the next challenges. And that was just my bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. And if you stop sharing your screen now, and it'd be lovely if you could email us through those slides so that we can pop them up on our website as well.
Thank you. I will.
And then I'll ask Annette to share her slides now, and we'll switch speakers. Brilliant, thank you. And after Annette's spoken, be lots of time for discussion, so do have a think about talking points or questions.
Thanks, Claire. Can you see that and hear me?
That's all good, yeah.
Thank you. So I'm Annette Pattinson and I work with Joyriders in Oxford. So Joyriders started in London and we're the Oxford group, and we run volunteer-led rides mainly for women-only rides, but we've expanded into working on activation projects to help people who weren't yet able to join our rides to participate as well. So Laura's given you a bit of background on from the rider's perspective, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of back office, behind the scenes effort that goes into putting these projects together. And so what we found that is that in Oxford now, the push for active travel has brought all the different cycling groups together. We've, until relatively recently, been working away separately and often feels like alone. But what's happening now is a coming together, because really capacity is our biggest issue. So we all have to work together and manage that capacity and form an ecosystem. So without any one of these partners in the puzzle, the projects can't run efficiently. So we need the cycle instructor training provider to keep training new instructors. There's a big shortage of cycle instructors. And if we meet people in the community while we're doing our projects who we think would want to train, we refer them to the training provider. Groups like Joyriders who do lead rides, we need to work closely with our local inclusive cycling specialist, so that people who need a bit of additional support to get going or would like to try a different kind of cycle can find some support, because we always say there's a cycle for everybody. It's just a question of finding the right one, and we've got some experts here in Oxford, Cyclability, who do that. And if there's no mechanics, then nothing works, literally. So we need the mechanics. So as I said before, capacity is our greatest challenge collectively. So we're testing out, broadening our approach, all following the shared framework of the National Standard for Cycle Training. And so what we're trying to do is combine traditional cycle training with other elements such as lead rides, especially for adults, because we're finding that adults, once they've learned to brake, pedal and steer, they often need an intermediate step before moving on to road training, just to get over the shock of riding on a road, because unfortunately, lots of people just don't think roads are for bikes. It's a bit of an alien concept to think that you would ride a bike on a road. They think just because I can ride, I'll just ride it on the pavement. So we need to make them understand that to get the most out of your bike and to be able to, go the places you want to go, you really need some road training as well. So the other thing about the lead rides is that it enables us to increase our capacity collectively, because people who don't necessarily want to train as an instructor can train as a ride leader. And so it's a great way of involving people in the community who are really skilled, have a lot of experience and want to contribute. So we can work hand in hand with the instructors on that. Bikeability in schools, where it's pretty much all cycle training now is provided in schools, but we believe that's only part of the picture. It's not universal. It assumes that the children can already ride before they've started and have their own bikes to use, and it also excludes home educated children, who we've met a few in our recent project. The other thing it doesn't address is that if their parents can't cycle, then with today's traffic conditions, they're unlikely to allow their children to cycle alone unless they live in an LTN or a really calm area. I wouldn't let my primary school children cycle on their own around where I live, even if they've done their training. So we like a family bikeability approach, so train whole families together to ride for their everyday journeys, and we favour training then bikes. So we prioritise the training that leads to the bikes. If you give bikes away without training, then people don't either use them or get the most out of them. So we think that it will give them loads of confidence and really get them using them if they have training first. And as I said, we prefer to train the adults first, so that they can get a bit of a head start on their children, because the children can often already ride and go tearing off without them. So they really need to be up to speed, so the whole family can ride together. How activation is coming together with infrastructure in Oxford at the moment is interesting. So our city's cycling group, Cyclox, invited Joyriders into the infrastructure group to have an input. And what that has led to is a realignment of priorities to where our projects are focused, because those are usually the areas with the worst infrastructure and severance. So the people who are learning to ride can't get out of their areas because it's so terrible. So that has been happening. That's been really great. And having a knowledge of cycle training also informs the infrastructure campaigning, and it helps us explain why we tell people to ignore the paint when we're training them. I found the junction assessment tool that Ranti presented a few weeks ago really helpful. And along with the national standard for cycling, things like that provide a framework that we can all talk about together and understand where each other are coming from. So if I look at the junction assessment tool, it says to me, if you can change a red or an amber arrow to a green arrow, you've moved the difficulty of the junction down from bikeability level 3, which is advanced riders, down to level 2, which is, doable, rideable by most riders. So in the way that local authorities work, probably, through no fault of their own, tends to be sort of different departments, quite fragmented. And then as campaigning organisations, we're kind of reacting to that. So if we can kind of have a coordinated approach, then we don't need to have silos in the way that we're working. We don't need to reflect that in the way we're campaigning. We can have a coherent approach across the activation and the infrastructure campaigning. So that's a junction. You might be able to see the cyclist there. So that's one of the junctions that we've been prioritising, because that's right on the border of all these areas that we're trying to encourage people onto bikes in. So finally, just to say where we're going, hopefully, the funding at the moment rightly targets specific postcodes and communities where the need is the greatest, and there's lower levels of cycling. And these areas are already feeling the triggers. So the cost of living is driving a lot of people to want to learn to cycle, and they're very aware of the health inequalities in their communities. So that's who we're working with at the moment. But next autumn, if we have our traffic filters in Oxford, we might have a whole new cohort of people who are experiencing the top-down trigger of no longer being able to drive where they want to, when they want to. And so the reasons will be different, and they'll maybe be starting from a different place, but they'll still need support. So we do need to sort of think about how we're going to scale this up. In an ideal world, we'd move towards a universal training model. So children are starting to cycle younger or learning to ride younger, and then everybody goes through a riding test when they're able to ride to school on their own. And we want to move to a situation where cycling lessons are as normal as swimming lessons. So it's just part of everyday life. I don't know how that would be funded, whether in some areas it could be subsidised, or, parents now usually pay for their children's swimming lessons and don't think anything of it. So, I don't know how that would be financed, but there's lots to think about in the future, about how we can move towards that. And that's my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. Really interesting to hear an example of how you're going about it in Oxford. I've got a few things that I wanted to pick up on, but while I'm doing that, perhaps other people can have a little think about anything they'd like to come in on, and also might build on the chat. So it strikes me that I just want to reshare actually what this picture that Laura showed. Hang on a moment, I'll just do it now. I took a screen grab of it because I just thought it was so interesting, which is obviously there's people on the call and in the chat who are saying, well, I'm involved in Bike Right, and Bike Right happens all over the country, and there's these training schemes are happening. this seemed to me to be the key point, which is that ultimately we've got to try and join up the various activation schemes in a place so that people are able to actually then go on and cycle. And I thought I'd open by saying, does anyone know if this is actually happening anywhere? And I didn't get that from your talk, Lara, as to say whether has this happened anywhere, or is this just as you see it? So perhaps I'll ask Laura initially to speak slightly more to that. Has this happened anywhere, Laura?
No, this is what we are trying to create in Oxford. And as Annette then pointed out in her presentation, we're trying to create this collaborative approach where, for example, when we train the people in an area, we can then feedback, for example, cyclogs about in this particular infrastructure is really needed, so people can just go from A to B more effectively. I mean, because the problem with non-cyclists is they are put off by every single barrier, so you have to knock out every single barrier to be able to do something that lasts in time. And in a way, even the funding problem the funding is a problem, because none of the project actually ends. So every person is different, and someone can learn to ride in 2 sessions, other in 10 sessions. And if you leave them at a point where they're not independent, you just lost all the session that you've done before. So with the bike draw, I wanted to point out we need all this part, and in Oxford it's not really happening.
Although you've got all the parts do seem to be in play, there are
Yes.
some schemes, and so what do you think it would take to bring them together? And it sounds like you've started bringing together the mechanics and
the point is so in my dream I would like to have a process in place. We know where to get the bikes, the second-hand bike. We know the people to speak with if we need to speak about infrastructure. We want also to be able to support people in particular. At the moment, we're kind of in very independent. So we're offering our service to anyone who wants to join us, but it could be more structured. It could be more effective. We could trigger to train other instructor. We can scale it up, and it would be another scale. And now, I mean, you saw the number. 2 people can train just a limited amount of people.
Thank you. And I'm going to bring Tim in first, because Tim, you were posting in the chat, and we heard from the scheme that you were talking about in the chat. You know, we had them on, and it was very impressive, the work that they were doing around participation in Birmingham. But yeah, Tim, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I've just joined Tours as an instructor about a year.
Remind us what that stands for.
Oh, sorry, it's the Health and Wellbeing Society. So it looks much more broadly than cycling, but it's got the city council contract to deliver bikeability to all the schools, which is one of the things I do. But I've just started working with one of the Tours officers on something in a local neighbourhood that's called Castle Vale, which has had a lot of development infrastructure and funding onto it, because it was one of our particularly disadvantaged communities. And the 2 talks today couldn't have come at a better moment. I thought they were both really inspiring, and I couldn't not agree with the philosophy of that connectedness. I'd like to put the officer in touch with you both, if that would be okay. You've obviously learned some things that we need to learn quite quickly, but just to tell you briefly about, thank you, David's put in the name I'd put a link to tours earlier in the chat. But this thing about trying to connect different activities. So initially we're going to do some learn to ride and bikeability, probably level 1, with families, so both the children and the adults at the same time, and try and set some training up for mechanics so that you put people with skills in the community, and then get some of the local people to train as instructors, so that you're investing in the capacity to expand. Tours provides bikes, which is one of the key things that they do, I think, and they're good quality bikes to learn on as well. So there's actually a container full of the bikes, 5 minutes walk from where we will do the training. What we don't do at the moment is let people borrow those bikes on a library. So that was one idea that I got from you, that you could integrate. But they've invested quite a lot in the infrastructure of the area, and it is more rideable than a lot of parts of Birmingham as well. You could at least take your skill and implement it in the community. It's a bit scary to go outside of that community on your bike. And David was talking about 3 deaths in Birmingham. Sadly, one of those deaths was just about halfway between where I live and where Castle Vale is. So it's not conducive. But that was wonderful, and I just wanted to say, can we connect? And I'm really inspired by what you've done. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Annette or Laura, I don't know if you want to say anything back to that. Bob, I've seen your hand up. We'll come on to you in a minute. Just want to stay on this point for a bit, just about this, how do we kind of join up things in place? But Laura or Annette, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, that was really great to hear about what's happening in Birmingham. And it sounds like you're already on your way to connecting all of those pieces, and, the importance of the whole family training. I think really happy to connect, but sounds like you've come to the same conclusions as us.
But you're ahead in implementation, I think. So
yeah, on the bikes, the bike library, it's kind of a very loose term. It's for as long as they want to keep it. So essentially, it's theirs. All that would happen is if they wanted to buy their own bike, they could then probably donate it back to any other projects, but essentially, it's their bike, really. Just to say about that.
So I'd love to know if anyone has got an example in where they are of, more of these schemes joining up. It's sort of, I'm in Manchester, as people might know, and kind of starting to see a little bit where, there's a cycle hire scheme now in the middle of Manchester. So that's at least been placed in places, using data near where some of the cycle infrastructure is going. But what I don't think we've got here is any kind of decent funded activation schemes. The council, the active travel 4 schemes, the funding for those often includes, in the business case, they have to include money for what they call activation projects. But in my experience, councils don't really know how to spend that money. And what you seem to be doing in Oxford, and there are other examples, we talk about Birmingham, if you can create a business that is going to do that in a grassroots way, so that's the last thing I wanted to ask you, Annette, was about, or either of you, is it easy to access funding, to construct an offer and say, we can effectively bring cycling to underserved audiences? And is that what your business is based on, and is there funding available for that?
Yeah, definitely. And just to quickly say, there's a Joyriders Manchester, so we might want to look them up, but each individual location is very different. So I know they've had a little bit of funding to hire bikes for people who haven't got access to bikes, so they're doing a little bit of that kind of work too, but I'm not sure how far down the line they are with the cycle training side of things, but definitely worth looking them up. Yes, the funding provider through in our local authority is coming from a public health perspective. So their main motivation is to get people active. They're called Active Oxfordshire. So we've also had a little bit of funding from Sport England with the same motivation. So it's sort of, rather than just specifically active travel, it's kind of public health funding. It's not huge amounts of funding, but I think, as Laura illustrated, when you haven't got much capacity, you don't need lots and lots of funding. In fact, it's quite difficult to spend it if you're very tiny. So it's just a gradual process of just slowly building up the capacity within the community, and then we can apply for larger pots of funding. In London, Joyriders is providing this same activation type project for Southwark, the borough of Southwark. So they've got 10 times the funding that we've got, but they're on a much larger scale. So it's just, I think everything's led by capacity really in the individual locations.
Thank you. Right, so we've got Bob and then Rachel. Bob, do you want to go first?
Okay, so this reminds me of how I ran the Direct Support for Cycling campaign, program in Ealing in the noughties up to 2013. And I had a budget of £200,000 a year, which I'm sure makes you feel like weeping. About half of that went on school cycle training, but the rest of what I did with the money was through the agency who I employed, which was Cycle Training UK, sadly not with us anymore, although some people like David Dansky are still working on cycle training elsewhere, we did a lot of adult cycle training. We did bike buddies riding to work, taking people, helping them select a route to work, doing one-to-one.
But what's your point, rather than saying you've done this in the past?
Well, my point is that there's a lot of this which can be done, but the key is funding. I would say a key element, which I don't think has been mentioned, is having secure and convenient home cycle parking. That needs to be linked in with it. What Ealing are doing now, as I understand, is that they've had a scheme for 1,000 bikes to be given to people, I think in Southall. I don't know how that's going to link in with training. I have a suspicion that they're trying to appear to be pro-cycling after having dropped the low traffic neighbourhood programme. So I don't know how it'll work. You were absolutely correct to say you can't just give people bikes, you have to give them the necessary support. But the key thing will be the sort of funding that should come through the local authority. And I would say there have been a lot of problems in London. It's just a thing to watch out for. When it comes to the tendering process, I believe that a lot of tenders and contracts have gone to agencies that were prepared to not offer a good enough service. And that's why it hasn't been good enough.
So let me try and put a question to Annette and Laura based on that, which is, I mean, I took strongly from their presentation that actually, certainly this is about every individual's got a different story. What is it that's stopping them or enabling them? So I don't think you can make sweeping generalizations that said it's about X or Y. But have you seen that cycle storage does crop up a lot, Annette, Laura, in things that are stopping people or not?
I think most of the people that have had bikes through our scheme, they are able to store them at home one way or another. But if we're providing bikes for the whole family, it starts to get a bit, you need a lot of space for that. So I absolutely agree. Secure cycle parking is really key. And people who live in flats, they're going to struggle with it. So it's not something that anyone's actually told us is a barrier. Do you agree, Laura? But it's definitely, it's obvious that it's definitely needed.
Yeah, but I think what we wanted to point out is that these are not really barriers. These are just points that can be easily sorted out and solved. So it's good that we address and we know what stops people, what makes people not be a cyclist. And yes, definitely storage might be a problem. I think the biggest factor is just we lost the culture. We just have many decades of being convinced that the car was the solution.
Right, yeah, well, that's a big one. Right, let's bring in Rachel.
Yeah, so I've kind of realised of late that activation will only work where there's a safe route. So we've got some new routes that are hopefully going to be starting off in the next year or so. There's one that's coming up which crosses the county city boundary. So all of these things, I sort of think we could almost do a standard package of measures to throw at new routes. So things like e-bike loan hire schemes we've got in Leicester when it goes into the county, so we can do that. Confidence rides, bikeability. We talk to all the bikeability instructors in the schools at the same time to get the kids moving. You know, you ask the council to lead some family led rides, you promote it, you get all the councillors riding. And this is literally what we're planning for now. So there'll be half a dozen, maybe 8 activation measures that we will get up and running when that new route opens, which will be the back end of the year probably. And we throw everything at it and say, I think you guys know I'm all about the women and the mothers. I'm all about them. So if they get up and running and riding and they're leading their children and saying, okay, this is safe enough, fine, off you go, we will change things around here. So I just believe that this isn't rocket science. I think there's a number of things that we have as standard, almost like a standard activation package, which we can do and say, we're lucky here in Leicester, we have got this e-bike loan hire, the Cycling UK scheme, which I think hopefully will be around when we do this. So that's my view, is don't have all this stuff unless there is a route that people can safely cycle on, and then throw everything at it.
Yeah, I have to agree about the e-bikes. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think in Oxford, what we really need is a shared e-bike scheme, because people are, not always not used to doing that amount of exercise. Older people, I feel it myself during COVID, not going out so much, you lose your physical condition quite easily. And if you haven't done much physical activity for a long time, it's a big ask to ask people to start cycling everywhere. So if we can help them in any way, they're only too pleased to take up all the support you're offering. E-bike's definitely key, and I have to agree about the mothers. Yeah.
And Rachel, maybe when you've what was your phrase, thrown everything at it, would love to hear like the story of that and how it goes. So when all those guns is the wrong word, but when they're all pointing at the right place and you've got a story to tell, do come and tell it.
And I'm going to get the MP on his bike as well. So it'll be the whole lot, the promotion and the behavioural change, and then we'll see how effective it is. So yeah, very happy to do that. I'll let you know how it goes.
Love it. Ruth, I'm just going to ask Sarah to come in first because she's not spoken yet, and then I'll come to you, Sarah. Oh, we've just got you on mute at the moment, Sarah. There we go.
Good evening, everybody. I was cooking and listening to start. I felt I've got to butt in Rushmore, where I live, Farnborough and Aldershot. We've been working one way or another about cycling since about 2009 and not really feeling I'm getting anywhere. I'm also a national standards instructor. Just now the national standards instructions changing, and it's getting much better. And I've just had to retrain. And there's this concept now of risk benefit, which is really changing the ways instructors need to instruct. And so me and my colleagues were trying very hard to get more children cycling in sort of everyday situations, sort of not protecting them quite as much from the busier roads, but using them, and then just talking about the hazards and thinking, right, is the risk of going on these roads of benefit to them, and coming to a point where thinking, yes, it is. So that's another story. But with Ride Rushmore, we've got several people who are national standards instructors. We've now got several people, one way or another, who've trained to be ride leaders. We've got several people who have done balanceability courses, that's all children on balance bikes. And we've got several people that have done some British cycling stuff on mountain bikes and that sort of thing. And we've also got Rushmore Cycle Forum. And we've got people like me who are campaigners. And we're coming together and so, for example, a couple of weeks ago, using development funding, we did a big bike revival event without the funding because Cycling UK hadn't got it together at that point, but we managed to get big bike revival going and at a development, and that was really good. We found an empty car park, they delivered a toilet, we cobbled together some money so we could get a bit paid, and Sylvester's Bike Shop, which is our local bike shop, came along and did Dr. Bike. And then the Cycling UK money has kicked in. So we've got funding for 2 more big bike revival events. We've done one and it was fabulous. And we're doing another one this Sunday and it will be brilliant. And we've also got Ride Rushmore. Now our ride leader, Colette, was given an award by Cycling UK for, volunteering so well for such a long time. And our Ride Rushmore rides have really taken off with all and sundry sort of riders. There's even a guy that comes along on his unicycle. So it's everybody. It's people, old people. Our oldest rider is 87. Our youngest rider is the guy on the unicycle. We've got Charlie Halliday that people will know, and it's quite informal. So people put up rides on Ride Rushmore, which is a Facebook site. There's also a WhatsApp group, and we go on a ride. And we've done our own in-house ride leadership training, and we're doing that now once a year. So you don't need to know the routes or anything. It can just be, you might not even want to lead a ride, but it means you can be a handy back marker. And we are really informal. What I'm trying to say is this network has happened to us informally, but the council are beginning to like us, especially, they don't like me so much because I'm more campaigny, but my partner, Jules, Joolz, she's managed to get funding from Rushmore Borough Council, and they like her so much. She's got funding from Hampshire County Council now. So it's beginning to happen. Our network is beginning to happen. And we had an event at Victoria Day last Sunday, which is it's awful. It's Victoria Day, Queen Victoria Day, sort of colonial thing.
Sarah, I'm just I'll just bring you to a pause there. I mean, I think what you've highlighted is that ultimately, I think that if activation is to work, actually schemes that are initiated from the grassroots and the result of people connected to community, that's kind of more likely to be successful. And if you can find a way to funding, which isn't always easy, then you can grow. And you've mentioned the big bike revival. Just if people don't know about that is actually quite a good way of accessing a small amount of funding from Cycling UK. If anyone can post a link to that in the chat, that's good. But thank you for highlighting Rushmore cycling, was it?
Yeah, it's the most unlikely place to have cycling.
Just sounds absolutely brilliant. Well done, you and Jules.
Yeah.
Right, Sarah, I'm going to move on if that's okay to Ruth.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for letting me talk.
No, it's fascinating.
Fabulous, absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Just 2 things very quickly. So Cycle Sisters, which I have mentioned before in Hounslow, was started up by one of the transport officers, safest transport officers, and she's quite a magician about getting money and funding. 80 women, Muslim women, did the Ride 100 on the 29th of May. They also cycled 28,500 miles in April, I think it was, for Smiles and Miles. And one of the things they've done is they've managed to get containers in places where they've managed to get funding for bikes from Hounslow Council and other sources of money. Someone's mentioned Section 106 money, there's SIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, which developers have to give. But there's also STARS, which I thought was a London thing, but I think it's a countrywide. Now, I don't exactly know what it stands for, but someone here will. It's something like safer travel, something. And our council, if you apply to them, if you're a school and you apply to them and you become part of the STARS, they will then do some kind of infrastructure around the school, but you have to apply for it. I only learned that last week, which is fantastic. So just, I mean, I know it's very difficult. You need someone to lead, and I'm not a leader, I'm a follower, but I kind of share information as much as I can, and that especially to see all these Muslim women. And what's extraordinary about them is that they've gone, literally, one woman I cycled with a couple of weeks ago, from never cycling 2 years ago to doing the Ride 100, and she now has a number of bikes and did the Ride 100 in 25-mile-an-hour average, which for a young woman, Muslim mother, was just extraordinary. So I think you're amazing, and well done for what you're doing. Good luck.
Thanks, Ruth. Adam, I was going to ask Annette and Laura to kind of come back and finish us off there, but if you've got a point that you want to bring in, then do.
Yeah, just quickly, I think it's about mode shift stars, which I think a lot of schools have signed up to. I've put a link in there, that was all.
Thank you. So yeah, I think we'll wrap up the discussion there and allow people to enjoy the rest of this lovely warm evening. But I would like to come back to Laura and Annette just with any final thoughts or requests for help from the group or connections or anything. Over back to you.
Anything from you, Laura?
Well, I just didn't want to leave you with a bit of my last sentence that we've got like 30 years of car culture. What we're experiencing now is that cycling is addicting, and it's incredible how transformational it is for these women to take part to our projects, and and I think a lot can be done.
Annette?
Yeah, I think what's changed recently is that it used to feel like wading through treacle trying to do activation, and now it feels like pulling a thread. It seems like everybody wants to do it, and we've just got to manage capacity of how to deliver support in the most effective way, and sort of working across groups to share the load and scale everything up and get ready for more people to want to learn to cycle.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, well, I'm going to wrap us up now, and I've got just going to flag up who's coming on next week. So it's interesting, there was a bit of chat in the chat about barriers. We've got Claire Poulton from Sustrans joining us next week to talk about the work they're doing to get barriers removed. As we know, Sustrans aren't always able to do that, but they have got a programme going on at the moment. And so she's going to talk about that, which is hopefully going to be useful for people who are keen to try and make that happen where they live. And we've also got a very interesting speaker from Germany, Michael Adler, who is part of an organisation called Tipping Points, and they've done 10 years worth of research on what is it that enables people to change behaviour and adopt different practices in their life. So very interesting to hear from him. Lastly, before I go, I'm just going to mention that while that is what's happening next week, I wanted to put a date in your diary, which is Wednesday the 5th of July. So normally, as you know, we run every Tuesday, but that week we are moving from Tuesday the 4th to Wednesday the 5th. We will be putting up a specific Eventbrite about this, but that is because we're very excited that we've been invited to present Active Travel Cafe from Cycle City, Cycle County, which is the main active travel conference in in England and happening in Oxford that week. So mark a date in your diary that will be moving same time, 5 o'clock, but will be on Wednesday the 5th that week. And Sally, who will be back then, those of you who remember Sally facilitating, Sally will be rejoining us. Myself and Roxanne will be facilitating there. And there are some of the people on this call will no doubt be there as speakers and guests as well. So that's it from me. Bob, I can see you've still got your hand up. Is there any last points you wanted to make?
Just a couple of very quickies. What Sarah said reminds me of how we started doing dynamic risk analysis, which shows that when you get kids out in certain circumstances, you do get changes in driver behaviour. You have to factor that in. Also, the cycling on prescription issue as a possible source of funding. That's it.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, well, thanks, everyone. Do enjoy the rest of your sunny evening, and great discussion. And thank you to Laura and Annette for really insightful presentations and great examples of grassroots activity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.